Okay, again, welcome to AI4C for December. As you know, this series runs every second Thursday of the month. From September to May, we take the summer off, and we've had a great lineup of speakers here, and you can see them there. And today, we are pleased to have Dr. Tara Retson from UC San Diego. As you know, those of you returning, you can view past recordings at the link there, and Whitney will put the link in the chat for us. Also, please note we've seen some automated bots, note-taking or recording bots, join the meeting, and unfortunately, our institution has disallowed that. So if we do see one of those bots, unfortunately, you will be removed from the session. So no automated note-taking or recording bots are allowed for this particular series. You can watch, as I say, the recordings anytime, and you can follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter as you go and see the different activities that we are doing, including any of the past lectures that we have here. So I'm delighted to introduce our speaker for today. Dr. Tara Retson earned her medical degree at Thomas Jefferson University in Philadelphia, as well as her Ph.D. in neuroscience. She completed her residency in radiology and artificial intelligence at the University of California, San Diego School of Medicine, where she was the chief resident for the clinician scientist radiology residency program and also chief resident for the diagnostic radiology residency program. She did a fellowship in breast imaging also at UC San Diego, and she stayed there, where she's now a board certified breast radiologist. She's an assistant professor at UC San Diego Health. She serves as deputy chief of AI in breast imaging, and she's a member of the Radiology AI working group for UC San Diego. Dr. Retson became interested in medical imaging algorithm development as a research resident. And as she says, she's been talking to machines ever since. And when it's too cold for her to hike, she thinks about these things, and her research focuses on practical and safe clinical implementation of AI, very important concepts. Dr. Retson became involved in the Radiological Society of North America, the RSNA Breast Imaging Challenge. She helped run that challenge while serving on the RSNA AI committee, a very big committee that puts on these challenges, and it's a lot of work. We're going to hear more about that today. She serves on several professional societies, including the American Physician Scientists Association, the RSNA, of course, Society for Breast Imaging, and the American Association for Women in Radiology. Today, we're going to hear about her experience running AI challenges in her talk entitled Competition to Clinic: How AI Challenges Shape the Future of Radiology. So I'm going to stop sharing, and Dr. Retson, you will have the floor.
Thank you. That was a very kind introduction. Thank you very much. All right, let me just do the confirmation. Everybody can see my screen. All good?
Yep.
All right, perfect. So, very nice to meet you all. Good morning from sunny Southern California. Good afternoon to all of you there. And hello to everybody who listens to this recorded as well. Thank you. So again, that was a very kind introduction. I'm Tara Retson from UCSD. This is just who I am. I have basically one disclosure. I do some technical writing. It's not relevant to this talk at all, though. And my other disclosure is that I really enjoy like ridiculous AI art. So you might see a little bit of that in this presentation as well. First things first, I do really want to thank two people for their input into this presentation. So most of what you're going to see today in this presentation is actually based on a talk that I recently gave with Jeff Rudy at one of the SIM meetings. So he contributed some slides to this. He was the head of the recent intracranial aneurysm challenge that RSNA did, in addition to being very involved with the BRATS challenges and the abdominal challenge. And then I want to thank Errol Kolak as well. He is up in Toronto. He's currently the chair of the RSNA AI committee. He led the 2023 Abdominal Trauma Challenge. And we've just had some like amazing talks about his experience with these challenges, which has led to some of the slides that you're going to see today. So what am I going to talk to you about today? AI challenges. So going from a leaderboard to the clinic and how we develop these and what they are. So obviously the first question is like, what is this? We're going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about how these challenges look in practice. And a lot of the things that we see in the challenges, I think are also really applicable to the research that we do as well, and thinking about like larger studies and multi-institutional AI studies. I'm going to talk a little bit about the challenge design, talk about some of the pitfalls and mitigation strategies. Again, I think a lot of this is actually really applicable to our research. And then what happens after these challenges? Like the data doesn't just evaporate. What do we do with it? So as I'm sure I don't need to really tell anybody here, AI has a lot of promise, right? Over the last few years, the number of AI papers has skyrocketed. So I straight up went to PubMed and typed in radiology AI, and you can see that graph is exponential over the last few years. So we get all these papers that are published, and yet at the same time, especially in radiology, we haven't really seen all of this data, all of this stuff turn into usable products. It's kind of that missing piece. There are at least 200 FDA cleared products at this point and that has been increasing over time. But just given the volume of research and the breadth of it, the translation to our clinical work has really been lagging. And I think part of that is because we're having trouble getting a lot of this stuff to work in the real world. It's this reproducibility gap. So all of these papers and products don't actually equal actual like clinical workflow. We're having trouble still understanding the real world performance. So companies will give us like, hey, this is how well our thing performs. It's great. It's the perfect thing. Give us lots of money. But then once we get it and try using it, we often have problems getting, a comparable numbers. And part of the barrier there is to this lack of reproducibility is that there really aren't a lot of standard test sets. So it can be very hard for us to really compare apples to apples. So to say if you have a company that says, hey, my AI algorithm is great, and then company B says, hey, my AI algorithm that does the same thing is also great. At the end of the day, we don't really know what it trained on. We're really relying on the company to be like, hey, this was our data, and we don't always know if that's going to be as applicable to us, and we can't really compare head to head either because they're both training and testing on different things. And so what happens with that and with institutions as well is it kind of ends up siloing us a little bit and creating these risks for bias and overfitting because you're working with your data which might be different over places. I mean, we're at big academic institutions and what we see even between Southern California and Boston is going to be very different and then what we see between either of those two places and a rural Midwestern practice is also going to be really different. So something that is really going to help this is these fair, uh, reproducible ways to benchmark stuff. And this is not a new concept. So the concept of standardized data sets has been around for quite a while. So for example, ImageNet that's been around since 2010, and what that is just thousands and thousands of little labeled thumbnails that you could go on and test your image identification software on. So you download this, you run your software, and see how good it was at guessing what was in that image. And this was actually something where we, as a field, kind of knew that like, oh, something has changed. Like we've hit a turning point. When we got down to that point where the algorithm performance was starting to get better than humans. We really haven't like had that moment in radiology. And I think part of that is because there hasn't been these like nice standardized sets. But over the last couple years, we've really been working on that. We've seen more and more large-scale publicly available data in radiology, a lot of which has been from challenges, and a lot of which has been from big academic institutions and big academic centers. And that really makes a lot of sense if you think about it. So it takes a lot of resources to set something like this up. So again, it's going to be harder if you're a rural practice who's already resource strapped to have the finances, the motivation, the people to label thousands of images. So challenges are what we hope is going to help fill this gap. So challenges can help highlight these relevant problems that are important to us because what's important to us might not always be what our industry colleagues think is going to be the most important thing. They can also help catalyze more collaborative data set curation and expert labeling at scale. This can help engage not just people at one institution, but a global community. It's a lot easier to say, hey, one site who's over here, give me 100 images than it is to say, hey, set up an entire data set. There's a lot, it's a big difference in scale, in finances, in work. So it really can contribute or get people who might not otherwise have been able to make data sets on their own to help contribute to these things. It's also going to help encourage transparency, especially with the RSNA ones, as we're going to talk about. Everything is very open. There's open leaderboards, there's code sharing, there's educational stuff that comes out of it, all to kind of help move the community along. And the nice part is that these can advance with the technological advancements too. We started with radiographs, and now we're starting to work on large language models. So now that I'm sure that I've convinced you that these are the greatest things since sliced bread, let's talk about what exactly an AI challenge is. So I'm going to talk mostly about the RSNA challenges, just because that's what I have the most experience with. And then, as Kathy so kindly said, I worked on the screening mammography challenge. That was a couple years ago. So what happens for these is RSNA comes up with a question, and they want to come up with something that's like a specific, measurable objective. So for example, is there cancer on this mammogram? And then they work with we gather our friends, we come up with a big data set, public data set, training data set, hidden test set. We get that curated and labeled. And then we release this and talk about like this is exactly what we're looking for. We have very standard, very transparent scoring metrics. And then we put this out, we use Kaggle, and then teams are going to be able to download that data, look at what we have to say about the data, submit an algorithm, and then be scored. And at the end, there's monetary prizes. So this is from actually the last one that just happened. This is announcing the next challenge that's going to come up for the knee. But RSNA has done at least one of these per year since 2017. They have a worldwide audience. We showcase the results again at the annual meeting. And again, it's really to help raise awareness of these medical imaging challenges and things that we think are important. And so this has really evolved over time. The first one was the Bone Age Challenge. That was in 2017. There were 37 teams. It was just plain film x-rays, and all you had to do was figure out the skeletal age in months. There were two sites that contributed. I think it was like Stanford and Jefferson. And since then, the breadth of this and the scale of it and the scope have just exploded. So a little bit incremental every year. Now we're at 2025. The last one was intracranial aneurysm detection. There were 1,100 teams. I want to say the largest one was almost 16 or 1,800 different teams, and teams can be comprised of multiple different people. For this last one, we had 18 different sites from all over the world. You can see them on that map there. And it wasn't just, one image. We had CTAs, MRAs, T1 post-contrast and T2 weighted MRIs, 13 possible locations within this 3D imaging that there could be an aneurysm as well. And so here you can see we started from bone age. When we got to the pulmonary embolism, that was really the intracranial hemorrhage, I think, was like the first 3D one. Pulmonary embolism was starting to look at location. We started bringing in bounding boxes, and then now we're up to intracranial aneurysm. Obviously, the complexity has gone way up. And I just want to give too a plug that RSNA, despite the fact again that that's what I'm most familiar with, we're not the only people that do that. We have the BRATS challenge, which is neuro. The Mackay group does a whole lot of stuff. So I would encourage you to check these out if there's a particular area that you're interested in. These are all available for you to take a look at. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about like what this looks like in practice. So I have to give a shout out to Felipe Kitamura. He wrote this amazing paper, which was in Radiology AI in 2024, kind of talking about the experiences here. You may recognize a few of the names from this paper. In fact, a lot of the people from the AI community got together and wrote about their experiences with the AI challenges. So the first thing we need to do for this is we need to pick a task, right? We need to decide what we're doing. And this is a little bit of an art versus a science. So a lot of us are probably coming from a research background, right? So in research, when you're thinking about making a data set or coming up with a research question, you want to have a new idea or hypothesis. You want some novelty. You're going to be using the data that's available to you, probably your internal data sets. You're going to have more flexible methods, and your analysis is going to evolve a little bit as you kind of get into it a little bit further. We want that statistical significance. That's our goal, right? Our focus is on advancing knowledge and getting those publications. Whereas with the challenge, it's a little different. I think Adam Flanders kind of famously said, like, to some degree, like, we're putting on a show with this, right? So it's a little bit of a different way of thinking about it because you have to, at the outset, have a very well-defined and measurable goal, ideally one that's actually achievable too. Because we want to, obviously people want to win the prize. We need to make sure that what we're doing is able to be reproduced and can help kind of go through the future with benchmarking. It's going to require some very large, very shareable, which is also kind of a tough problem, and de-identified data sets. We're going to have to fix a lot of the protocols, test sets, and metrics at the outset. And then our focus is going to be more on the advancing the community standards and validation. We're going to be encouraging these tool developments. And ultimately, we want not just publications, but an open data set, a leaderboard, and reproducibility. So the secret sauce of this is really picking your team. And I think that, again, that kind of applies to everything. Whether you're a researcher, whether you're a clinician, you got to have good people. So for us, picking a diverse team is very important, and not just in radiologists with different backgrounds, right? We want people that have clinical expertise, people that have the technical expertise, people that have the administrative expertise, because all of these aspects are touched. And you're going to be meeting with these people a lot, so they should probably be cool, okay? Um, it is we benefit from now having done this enough times that there's a lot of like deadlines that we try to predefine just to keep everybody on task. And it really helps to have people that have done this before and have experience running challenges. But you also need to remember to bring in new people, not just for their new ideas, but for helping train them so that they can take over in the future as well. And as Errol Kolek says, it's very important to pick people who are willing to get things done. That as an organizer, like you may have to jump in and start going through data sets. You may have to start like looking at that information yourself, working with the different institutions, writing IRBs. And so once we have our team, the other part of the team is where we're going to put this thing, right? So there's different groups that do this. There's Kaggle, there's Grand Challenge, Sage Bio Networks. We've tended to use Kaggle. They tend to have a really big community and user base. They're very well known for hosting challenges. There's always some pluses and minuses with any of these as well. Particularly, there are limitations on the data size, the metrics they'll support, kind of, and the personnel support that they're all going to offer as well. Okay, so we know where we're going with this. We're getting ready. Now we need to start actually making the data set. So the first thing we want to do is recruit some sites because we need the data, right? So we're going to reach out to our network. Always ask your friends first. It's always a good place to start. Okay. It's helpful to have somebody at some different sites that is willing to be the clinical champion for this. It's always nice to have somebody that's going to be like, yeah, I got this. Like, I'm going to dig up 100 abdominal CTs. Let's go. Especially because there's a lot that this person and a lot that we have to interface with. It's not just, here, let me give you 100 CTs. We also need to start thinking about interfacing with IT, interfacing with any institution's privacy policy. There's going to be IRB considerations, whether that's broad or site specific. There's also going to be data use agreements as well. And so that could be different between, for example, RSNA or the PI's main institution. And these are all different across different countries and different institutions. So in the US, we have a little bit more of a standard, very paperwork heavy way of doing this. But this is very different if you go to Europe, Africa, Asia, like it changes in every site. Everybody has kind of different privacy concerns and willingness to share information. So the more simple, like with anything in life, the more simple you can make this, the better. And like with anything in life, it's good to anticipate some delays in this process as well. The statistic that Ariel gave me is, there's a lot of people that like want to help and want to get involved, but ultimately only about 50% of the interested sites are actually going to be able to ultimately follow through. And part of that is because this side of the process gets very difficult, just grabbing the images themselves tends to kind of be on the easier side. So another thing that we need to do is as we're asking for this stuff, we need to make it very clear what we're asking for. And This is one of those things where like this seems like this should be really intuitive, right? And yet once you do it, you realize like, oh, okay, maybe there's a lot of variability in here. So things you need to make sure that you're talking about is like how many positive versus negative cases do you want? What's the exclusion criteria? What's the inclusion criteria? How many different modalities or sequences do you want? Do we want just the entire dump of the patient jacket, including all the localizers and everything, or do we need this to be more streamed down? Um, what demographic information do we actually need as well? What time points do we need? So all of these things that, it seems like it would be like just, oh, give me just 100 head CTs, no problem. There's actually like a lot that goes into very specific information. But okay, we've got our clinical champions. They're giving us a bunch of images, and now we need to do something with those, right? So data de-identification is huge. This is whether you're a researcher or a clinician or running challenges, no matter what you're doing, PHI is so, so critical and needs to be something we think about at every step. So obviously HIPAA has 18 safe harbor identifiers. We need to make sure that there is no personally identifying information anywhere on any of these images. So something that is a great resource, I'd encourage you all to check this out if you don't already know about it, is the RSNA anonymizer. You can grab that off GitHub. That helps look at the DICOM data that comes with the images and cleans up some of the PHI. There's also different ways to think about this too, and one of those is a blacklist versus a whitelist. So with a blacklist for the DICOM tags, what you're doing is you are removing certain tags and leaving the rest. So you're saying like patient ID, patient name, like these are all the things that I'm taking out, but I'm okay with keeping the rest of the tags. Versus the counterpart to that is a whitelist, which is where you decide which ones you want to keep. So I'm going to say I want to keep scanner name and slice thickness and everything else goes. And each of these has kind of some advantages or disadvantages. With the whitelist approach, the nice part is that if tags are added, if anything is different, you don't have to worry about it quite so much. But obviously each of these has their pluses and minuses. The other thing that we need to worry about is personal health information in pixel data. And one of the things that I think is absolutely fascinating is facial recognition, especially from head CTs. So this paper, I mean, we've known about this for a while. This paper is from 2017, but it shows that basically like they thought they were taking these head CTs that had all the DICOM data taken off of them and they were anonymized. But as it turns out, you can reconstruct the face and you can use facial recognition on that, and then like you're getting a picture of a person. So there are now software packages, especially that basically just like take the face part out of head images, which I think is pretty cool. Okay, so our data is all nice and clean. We're good there. Now we need to start thinking about the metric and then getting the data annotated. And I say these are kind of together for a reason. So before we have people start labeling these images, we need to think about what the metric's going to do and like what question we're asking, because this is actually going to determine a lot about our labeling. So for example, the label is going to look very different if we're trying to figure out how large a PE is versus like whether or not there is a pulmonary embolism. It's also very different if you're asking a question about screening versus asking a question about identification of masses or trauma grade, right? So once you figure this out, and there's a whole bunch of different options, then it's time to start recruiting our annotators. So when we're doing this, oh sorry, let me just back up to show you a little bit about what like labeling might look like. Okay, so we have, for example, study level labels. So I'm going to use the abdominal trauma for an example here. So that could be no injury, high injury, low grade injury. There's slice level labels, so that could be on this image 42, there is extravasation. Or that could be voxel-wise labels or bounding boxes where you're going to say, okay, this box is the kidney or this squiggle is going to be my hemorrhage. Okay? These can look very different depending on what your question is. And ultimately, despite all of this work, it might not actually really matter. In 2022, so the cervical spine challenge in 2022, they had bounding boxes, and ultimately, when people kind of went back and did like a really big analysis of it, they found that the bounding boxes really weren't utilized by the winners. They actually relied more on study labels and the voxel-wise segmentations, the smaller, more detailed ones. In the 2019 Intracranial Hemorrhage Challenge, also, they showed, again, a retrospective analysis showed basically equivalent performance with study level labels versus with the slice level labels. So ultimately, we might not know until we can look back as to which of our labels are going to be most helpful, but it's an important thing to kind of think about how we would solve those problems and come up with the labeling and the metric appropriately. Okay, so now we need to get our annotators. We need to find our friends. And again, this is really like a ask your network kind of thing. So basically, the easiest thing to do is to ask the subspecialties for some help. So for example, with the abdominal radiology trauma one, we asked the Society of Abdominal Radiology and the emergency radiologists. For the intracranial hemorrhage, we got ASNR, the Neuroradiology Society, involved. And so somebody will reach out to them, somebody that knows them, say, hey, we could use some help. We put out this sign up form, and then the annotated people who are interested can contact us. This is where we can then choose from a variety of platforms. Again, it really kind of depends on what our question is, but there's a whole bunch of options out there. These are just a couple of them. And then we give them some instructions. So this is, you can see there's Jeff Rudy up in the corner there, giving a little talk, a video about how to do these labels. And then people are doing this mostly out of the goodness of their heart, frankly. And so what we try to do is make this either a little bit more fun for them or give them kind of a reward as a thank you, because this is a really lot of work. You're essentially like doing bonus work. So we have leaderboards. And what that shows is basically like this person has annotated, for example, 259 images in the round 3 of labeling. They get these points. And then so not only does this gamify it a little bit, but for the people that have kind of the highest amount of labels, we've been able to offer them some recognition and some authorship on some of the papers that come out of this as well. So we want to try to thank the people that are helping us. Good practice in life, right? We also have to consider a little bit that sometimes the experts disagree. Like you may have two incredibly fellowship, highly trained people, and they might disagree on a finding. So what are we going to do about that? So ideally, each case is going to have multiple labels and be annotated at least twice. Often that means one site level label. So when we get the head CT, for example, it's going to have the diagnosis there, and then we have our annotator on top of that. Or if the images don't have necessarily a diagnosis, we have two annotators look at them. In a perfect world, you'd be able to do this on a full data set. Practically, that's not always the case, but you want to do it at least on a chunk of the data just to kind of double check everything and make sure that not only your annotators are doing their job, but that the data that you're getting is good as well. Okay? It's just kind of that final sanity check. Okay, so we've got our people, they've labeled all our stuff, we have the data set, what are we going to do with it? So we're going to split it. So we want to have that train, validation, and test set. We want those to all be separate. So in a perfect world, you're going to have a multi-institutional sample, and you're going to have enough from the different sites that you can kind of divide it up over these 3 groups. We really want to use that to improve generalization. We don't want, all the UCSD studies in the train, and then all the MGH studies in validation. We want to have a little bit everywhere. Um, Less processing of this data is generally better for real world generalization, right? We don't want to have this data that's been super cleaned because then if you're trying to go and use this after the fact, it might not be as applicable. And so again, we're going to split this into those 3 groups, make sure there's enough rare cases. This is just kind of good data hygiene. And finally, we have to decide how big this data set is going to be, because in a perfect world, we would have millions and millions of images, right? Because our models love more data. But at the same time, we're limited by how many people we can have actually label this stuff, because that's a lot of work, and how much resources the hosting organization is willing to offer to us. So for example, Kaggle will only offer us 500 gigs. So that kind of puts a cap on how much you can do. We also want to make sure that the inference time is kept a little bit more reasonable. So for example, it may take days and days and days to train an LLM. This is a competition. It's only a couple of months. People need to be able to train and retrain and do things pretty quickly. Okay, so now let's launch the competition. Okay, so we're going to first say, hey, everybody, we did it. Here it is. So at the start of my slides, I had a picture of Howard. He was showing off the knee challenge that's coming up. And so when that launches, we're going to start and we're going to have it on Kaggle and we're going to start monitoring it. So what you can see on the left is basically like how everybody is interacting with this. And we've been really fortunate with the Kaggle and the groups of people that have been participating in this, that everybody is extremely collegial. It's been really cool. So you can see on the left, this is from the intracranial aneurysm detection challenge. This is just the discussion board that's on Kaggle. People who are, the teams will go on and be like, hey, I found this really cool thing. Hey, I saw this other data set. There's a Discord that people are posting. I had trouble with this. Can you help me? So that's actually been not only just a really encouraging, like as a human to see, but a great resource as well. And then as the challenge is running, we have the public and the private leaderboard kind of hiding behind it. So in the public leaderboard, it's very small text up there, but you can see so that's 32% of the test data. And so that lets challengers kind of resubmit as many times as they want. They can get their scores and figure out how they're doing. And then we have the private leaderboard, and that's about 68% of the test data. And that is, we don't tell them how they're doing on that, but that's just to make sure that everything is fair, and we're trying to kind of prevent data leakage by having that separated. So once a couple months has gone by, everybody's submitted their stuff, we have our winners. First, we're gonna let them know. And what's really been important to RSNA as like one of the core values of these challenges is that when or for these teams to be eligible for the prizes, they need to release their code. So they need open source code. They need to talk about their solutions, preferably like describe it, preferably write a white paper. Not everybody does that, but at least they open up their code so that anybody can see it. This helps for a couple of reasons. First, it's really, harmonizes with the goal of like, let's make this a resource. Let's teach some people some things with this. But it also helps ensure that there's no cheating. And so there are some people from the committee, brave souls that will go through the winner's code and take a look at stuff, try to run it, and make sure that it's not, or just kind of falsifying the information. We also want to make sure that people aren't using multiple accounts, aren't using private data sets, and that unless that's specifically allowed, and that they're following more specific rules. So for example, like you're not predicting yes PE if you don't provide a specific image that has a PE on it. Again, just to make sure that we're really comparing apples to apples. And then, like I said, people will evaluate the winning team solution. And then the leading competitors actually have a chance to present at our RSNA. So for this year, I think we had one group that actually came in person, which was super cool. And then two others submitted videos. And in those, they basically talk about like, hey, this is how we did this. This is what we were thinking, and this was our thought process. And so again, just to emphasize that you have to make your code available after this challenge if you're one of the winners. So details of the solution, including the training and the inference code, has to be publicly available to receive your prize. The code license is open, including some commercial use. And then we're trying to get it so that there are more that there are model weights that are also available publicly as well. Again, just for reproducibility. And you'll see, I'll talk a little bit more about that and the work that we've done on that as well right now. So that's our challenge. And now what happens, right? So we've announced the winner. Everybody goes and has a nice reception. We all have a great time at RSNA. We come back from RSNA, and now what happens to this information? The nice part about this is that it's been so important to everyone from the outset that this isn't information that just evaporates, right? We wanted this to do something. So challenge is not the end. This is the start of where we start translating stuff. One of the first things that we do is the data resource papers. So with this, these are like very information heavy write-ups that usually go into Rad AI, and it talks about like, okay, there's this many sites, these are the demographics, like this is what's in the data set. This is, the DICOMs, these are all the technical details, these are the metrics we're using. And all that information is available again so that in the future, if you wanted to go back and use that data set, that information is there for you. Again, here you go. There's after that there are then like the technical write-ups, a little bit different than the data set write-ups. So with these write-ups, these happen again at the end, and this is here we're going to say like, okay, in the 2022 challenge, there were this many teams. These are the top teams' performance. This is kind of a graph of how everybody did. It's going to talk a little bit more about the data set as well, and then more about what that final evaluation was too. Again, so that 5 years from now, you're like, hey, I want to do some abdominal work. It's easy to go back and know exactly what we did in the first place. And then this is something that is probably very near and dear to Dr. Andreel's heart. This is the Educational Merit Award. This is something that I think is not publicized enough, quite frankly. I think that you should all know that this exists because it is really, really valuable. So at each challenge, we recognize a winner from among the top teams whose entry is deemed as the outstanding in clarity, completeness, organization, and efficiency of its submitted code. And so what these winners can have the option to do is basically submit um, what they did, why they did it, and basically just make an educational resource for us. So this one's from one of the spine challenges, the 2024 one. And so this group, Sony Spine, TKAM, and Moyashi, went through, and so you can see they've like made these beautiful graphs. So like, here's the first thing we did, here's how we cropped it, here's the second stage, here's what we did. They even go on in this document to talk about like what didn't work, what did work, what did they like. They made a video for this, and then you can see they've linked to their code as well. So just really nice, especially I would encourage if there's any trainees out there, anybody who's like starting to be new to AI and wants to get a little bit more into the technical meat of it, to check this out. Because what you can basically do is follow one of these winning entries, kind of start to finish yourself, just see what they did and kind of learn lessons from them. Really nice way to like get into this. And then just to emphasize again, like all of this data, it's still there, right? So this is from the screening mammography challenge. If you go to Kaggle, this is what it looks like. You can click right there, download all the raw data. And again, you can see the solutions from the top teams. So the goal for this is to really support this continuing education and training, be available for benchmarking. So now, different groups can see like, oh, my algorithm's performing like this, et cetera, et cetera. We want to extend the value of this. Again, people went through a lot of work to make these data sets. We want them to be durable. And you can go on and use their solution with the code and the notebooks as a learning resource as well. Another thing that's I think is really fun is that we've started to do research on these challenges. And I know that I talked about how, you're really asking different questions, but now we're starting to ask research questions of our clinical challenges. So this, for example, this is from the 2020 challenge. The initial challenge itself was image level PE detection. So it was basically like PE, no PE, what image? And then this group, again, this is Errol Kolak's group, went in and was like, okay, we've got some time and a lot of love in our hearts, so like let's add to this data. So they went in and added bounding boxes for a subset of data to show where the PE was. So now this data from this challenge exists with additional information. Instead of just saying like image 42 has a PE, there is localization, there's enumeration, and a much finer grain detail versus simply like it's there, it's not there. Okay. And so the goal with this was to help develop more complex algorithms in the future and to make this data available. Another thing that we're doing too is like looking at the challenge data and seeing how it compares to the real world. So Yan Chen recently published this. Is from the looking back at the screening mammography challenge. And what she did and her group did was they ensembled some of the models. So they took the top 10 teams, so the top team, the top 10 teams, and the top three teams, and kind of grouped them together. And so she found that if you combine the top three, you increased the recall, but you also increase the sensitivity and decrease the specificity. If you combine the top 10, that ensemble is actually pretty close to radiologists. And one of the interesting things that we're noticing is that the models actually pick up on different features between them, and then having the human also kind of picks up on different features. So kind of combining them as a group is kind of really the way to go. And of course, there's also variations by site as well. This is another example of some external validation that's been done. So this is looking at the C-spine challenge, again, Dr. Kolak's group. Um, Basically, they took the 7 top performing models from the 2022 challenge, retrospectively evaluated them on one of their data sets. They took 1,800 CT scans of their own and found that all top 7 of these models should decrease performance on their clinical set compared to what they had shown on the challenge data set, but everybody still maintained pretty high performance. So, for example, on the non-contrast scans, the models were still doing an AUC of 0.89. On the contrast ones, 0.88, so still pretty decent. And the thought being that if you're out in the community and you want somewhere to start from, this is maybe not a bad way to go. It actually does work in practice, which is such an issue we've had with translation. Likewise, for the spleen study, again, from Dr. Kolak, what they did is their group took an external data set of 1,200 CT scans of the spleen, and so this was part of the abdominal challenge. In the abdominal challenge, there were multiple organs that were graded for injury, and in this, they were just looking at the spleen. Okay? And so what they found is that the ML models achieved an AUC of 0.93, not too bad, right? And so you can see with the AUC curves, the blue, which is all the way to the left, which is kind of a little bit hard to see, was the public data set. Everybody does a little bit worse on the private data set, which is kind of that the arc in orange. And then on the external, little bit less as well. But again, we're talking about public data set of 0.95 versus an external data set of 0.93. So really like looking pretty good. And it also helps us get more granular detail too in terms of just classify injury, how do they do with the different grades, et cetera, et cetera. Another thing that's kind of been tangential that's come out of this is the roadmap and atlas projects. So Charles Kahn, the editor of the journal Radiology AI, in his wisdom, he was like, "Man, there's a lot of stuff out there, and we should probably be more organized." So he came up with this idea for the roadmap project, and basically what that is it's this huge ontology, this data dictionary of all these formal descriptions for radiology models and data sets, lots of definitions. Everything is able to be put in a JSON document schema, so it's easily like manipulatable, searchable, and it's a way to make really standardized model cards. And so kind of the goal of that is this RSNA annotated library of AI systems, the Atlas project, where basically it's a way to document AI models and just make them more searchable, make them easier to find. So if I'm out here looking for a breast cancer detection model, like there's a lot of stuff out there. And it's not very organized. And so if I'm trying to compare 14 different papers with models, I have to go into each and every one of those papers and be like, okay, this group used 10,000 patients, this group used 100 patients just from their institution, and try to get a sense of like who's doing what and what's working. Whereas with this, the goal is to actually, it's kind of a cool project, use some LLMs, scrape a lot of the papers that are being done, make model cards. So just like these nice little cards that somebody can sit and easily verify to say like, okay, this model used this patient population, these demographics, this many cases, this type of analysis, and just have this like nice searchable database so that we all have a better resource. And so um, what's next, right? That's always the important question. And so one of the big things that is going to come up, I think, is a switch to being able to use these data sets for commercial use. So up until now, the challenge rules and licensing on data sets were non-commercial only. So your institution could pull down these algorithms and use them, but you as a company could not. And so right now there are no direct commercial products that have come out of any of these data sets. Some commercial products did exist in parallel. Like for example, I think during the PE challenge, like ADOC's PE algorithm was also out there at the same time, but like no products have directly come from these challenges. So Going forward, though, the future challenges are going to have commercial agreements in their data use, in their IRBs, kind of right from the get-go. Um, so again, right now, you can use all of these algorithms under an IRB, but as a company, you cannot. So that's about to change. And that's going to start, I think, with the knee MRI challenge. This is going to be the first multimodal one. This is the one we like just released to the world. I think it's going to start in a couple months. If anybody's interested, I encourage you to check that out. But again, it's going to be first multimodal, multilingual data set. So in this, there's going to be reports in, I think there's multiple different languages, and not just the super most common ones. So not just, English, French, Spanish, German, right? There's going to be reports in, I think, Croatian. There's a site that's gonna give us data as well. So like a whole bunch of different languages. Really excited about it, and it's gonna have images and reports. So this is like the difference between going from plain films to scale up to 3D, and we're all real stoked. Again, it's now going to have commercial use for the data, and almost 50 sites have expressed interest in contributing as well. So what do I want to have you like take home from all of this stuff, right? Why are we doing this? Why are we even bothering? So the challenge goals, we really want to drive engagement. We want people to be excited about AI and its potential. And beyond that, we want AI to actually like do the thing. We want to be able to use it in the real world and assess how we're able to use it in the real world. To do that, we know that we want to have big data sets. There's a lot of pitfalls that go along with that. There's a lot of things that only a big institution can offer. Again, like with the diverse collaboration, it's a lot easier if you're a big institution to make a data set. So we want to be that big institution to help other smaller areas so that we have these more diverse collaborations, not just nationally, but internationally and around the world. We also want to make sure that there's participation and volunteer opportunities. We want people to be excited about this stuff. We want people to feel like they can get involved in AI. Even if you don't have a coding background, you can sit and label, you can start to understand this, you can become more interested and engaged with it. We think it has a lot of transformative potential in healthcare. So our successful challenge, we're going to define our task. And again, our task might not be the same as a research task, but we're going to define something that is an achievable goal. We're going to work very hard to get that representative and diverse data set by calling all of our friends. We're going to get some high quality labels from our specialist societies. We're going to make sure that we have a metric that's going to work. Again, might be different than what you would think with research, but this is a challenge. And then we're going to make sure we have really transparent rules, a secure platform, and realistic constraints. And then we want all of this to be available to everyone as a resource. So again, why do we need these? We want these benchmarks. We want to train the next generation of AI literate radiologists, and that includes all of you. We want to foster global collaboration and education, drive reproducibility, fairness, and transparency. We want to finally be able to compare apples to apples. We want our ImageNet for radiology AI, and we want to help accelerate clinical translation, through more open innovation. All right, so thank you very much. That's my talk. Please do not hesitate to email me, reach out. This is something that I am just so ridiculously passionate about. So I am happy to talk to any of you at any time. Obvious email address health.ucsd.edu. And I think if anybody has any questions, I tried to leave just a couple minutes for that. So I'm happy to talk about that or go take a little walk, enjoy your lunch.
Well, fantastic, Dr. Retson. Thank you so much. That was a wonderful tour of challenges that, the reason why it gives us a level playing field for really evaluating these things. And I was struck by, how you went through this is really how you might go through thinking about implementing something clinically. One, what is the clinical question? Two, do you have a clinical champion? Very, very important. What is the data wrangling, and what is the metric? When you implement something even clinically, how would you evaluate it? So I think we've learned so much from these challenges. Feel free to put things into the chat, and let me see if there are any questions in there now. Yeah, someone is asking, sort of Matt Haynes is asking, was your PhD in computer science or engineering? So it was in neuroscience. So maybe you can go ahead and answer that question.
I love that question. I will just real quick to your point,
Yeah.
um, amazing point, say that like so much of what we think about when designing these challenges is what we're all thinking about when we're designing clinical trials, research questions. Even though it has like a slightly different kind of tilt to it, there you can still see that influence in all this as well. So a lot of
Yeah.
lessons that taken from research into the trials and the trials back into our own research as well.
Yeah, and I'll add before you answer that question, we'll keep everyone in suspense. But uh, I think another thing to note is the clinical questions that are chosen for these challenges are really relevant, clinically relevant, and things that you would actually be doing. And for example, this last one, difficult things to do for a radiologist, and so I think that's both the pull for clinical people to join as well as the data scientists. They're saying, hey, there's need for us to help in this. So go ahead. Tell us how your background, a little more about your background.
I love that. This is actually sorry, Matt Haynes, you're going to get a little bit more of an explanation than I think you might have bargained for. My background is actually in neuroscience. Um, so that's what my PhD is in. It is in alcohol addiction and neurocircuitry of stress and behavior. So when I came to UCSD in 2017, I was offered a research residency. And it starts for us with a year of basically just like blank slate. You can do whatever you want. I went and I talked to a bunch of people in neuroscience, and then I just didn't like have like a passion for it. And I did not want to work with rats anymore. And so I I talked to one of the directors, and I was like, okay, Claude, who is doing just the weird stuff? Like what is like the crazy stuff happening right now? And he's like, oh, there's this guy, Albert Chow. Um, and Albert Chow does AI research. He was one of the co-founders of one of the first FDA AI-based radiology companies called Arteris. So I walked into Albert's lab. He's a radiologist, a chest radiologist, and I was like, "Hi, it's nice to meet you. I've never coded a single thing in my life. I don't know anything about this, but I think it's really cool, and I'm free for a year. Um, you don't have to like highly trained person that you don't have to pay for. Can I come work with you?" And he was like, "Heck yeah, let's go." Um, and so Albert and I have been good friends ever since, and that's when I like to say that's when I first started talking to machines and just kind of haven't stopped. I just really fell in love with it.
Oh, I love
So
that. I love that story. Yeah. So really during your residency, and we see a lot of our residents who will come and say, I want to learn about this. And many of them haven't coded. And, I tell them, if they want to learn to code, great, and they can get very involved in these activities, but they can also contribute to the process, even if they don't code, because their clinical
mhm,
expertise is often very, very useful in evaluating a product or evaluating a model and seeing where it goes wrong and so on and so forth. I also like that you noted about the educational aspect of these is near and dear to my heart. But we saw that during the competitions on the chat boards, the discussion boards, people were saying, "I'm having a problem with this," and other people, competitors, would answer their question and say, "Here, try this tool." Or we had people who were clinical backgrounds explain, hey, what a radiologist does is look at different window and levels that correspond to in CT correspond to different tissues, and you need to go here. Or yes, we look at neighboring slices, and that's very important. So people started to use the types of models that use a series kinds of things to
mhm.
solve the problem. So it was very much a collaborative and a team sport. So I think it was very, very interesting that how important that was. I liked how you went through, you know, you talked about East Coast, West Coast. And in fact, if you look at where data has come from for many
Yeah.
models and for a lot of the research activities, it's really centered on the East Coast and on the West Coast and not much in between, where
Mhm.
patient populations may be very, very different. And I think these challenges have done an incredible job. You showed a map of the world really, and how people contributed from all over to make these data sets. And these data sets are very, very valuable. People can go on to the website, and I believe they have to, if they use it and then publish, all we ask is that you give attribution to the RSNA to the challenge. Is that correct? If someone wants to use this in their own, use the data in their own, is that what they have to do?
Yes, I believe that's the case. And just kind of for time, I did have some slides in there at one point about kind of how how we want to like release this data. So even though now it's going to be more commercial use available, for a while it was like we wanted to make sure that we knew who was using it and that it was their fair attribution was given. So exactly to your point, initially I think you could go on and basically you could just kind of cite it, but you did need to go on and like kind of register to download the information, and then try to kind of keep a little bit of eye on like, okay, well, is it okay if you just give it to your friends? Is it okay if this data is just kind of out there, or do we want to have more an idea of like, okay, Tara has downloaded this data and now I'm publishing this paper, versus just kind of having it out on the internet. So that was something that the committee I think has had like a lot of discussions about. But I'm personally very excited to see that this is now just it's out there. You can use it. Like let's get this information out.
And they are fantastic data sets. They're
Oh yeah,
incredibly well annotated. And quite honestly, the work has been done for you. You know, you have the metrics, and many of the metrics are really quite well designed, well thought out. And the annotations, as you mentioned, and others will go and then maybe add to those annotations and contribute back. So it's a wonderful data set. It's a wonderful learning experience. And I think we were initially surprised with the people that joined were real pure, some of them were pure data scientists
oh
who were,
yeah,
I think one of them, I recall, was out of Japan, and his professional job was using AI to help with the baseball league somehow. And I thought, my God, and now he joined, he was one of the top performers.
yeah.
And people were seeing, gosh, we need data science help in medicine. And so they were joining, and then people were joining teams with a clinical person. So it's really a fun activity. What would you advise someone to do? Let's say they're a resident, maybe radiology, maybe they're in informatics or they're an emergency room, whatever, a clinician. What would you advise them to do? How to get involved in this field as you did? And maybe they're not going to go and do a PhD, but what are things they can do?
So I guess I will leave this then as my parting thought is that if you're interested in this, the barrier to entry is so low. I mean, despite the fact that it seems like, oh my gosh, there's all this complicated stuff. We have these large language models. When I started, like I had to do it the hard way. Don't do it that way. Like I had to learn to code. It was horrible. But now it's actually become so much easier especially with things like Claude, the large language models. My coding is remedial at best at this point. Like I would 100% just go there and have a LLM kind of vibe code me something up. So I think that's really made it a lot easier actually to get into this and to start understanding some more of the technical background. I think these educational resources, especially that Kathy's highlighted, are just so important and they're so easy. It's a really nice way that if you want to see the nuts and bolts, you can kind of follow one of these step by step and be like, okay, this is what goes into it. It helps you understand a little bit more of the data processing. I'll give a shout out like anything Ian Pan has been involved in. He's a resident. He's not only just like one of the nicest people I've ever met, but he is brilliant and has done these really great educational resources, very accessible. So just yeah, just get in there, try it out. And if you decide you don't like coding, there is so much to be done, like we said on the clinical side as well, just understanding that world as well and being that bridge between the technical and the clinical is huge, invaluable, absolutely invaluable.
Fantastic. Yes, and Ian is now a fellow, in a neuro radiology
Yeah.
fellow, and he started participating as an intern. Did it during his internship year, so I don't know how he did it, but wonderful. Go check out those educational discussions. I learned so much by going through those, and if you want to get involved, please do reach out to the RSNA and some of these other places. And Dr. Retson, thank you so much for a wonderful talk. Really, really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me. This has been an absolute blast. I've been having a great time. I appreciate it very much. It's been absolutely wonderful to meet all of you.
Great. And everyone have happy holidays. Bye bye. Take
Thanks,
care.
everybody.